She hadn't slept in 2 nights, hadn't eaten in one. Her children couldn't feel their fingers. And still she walked. 30 miles through thornbrush and frost, just to find a door. What waited on the other side was not mercy, but a man. With blood on his name, the last mile nearly killed her. Rachel Morgan's steps dragged through red mud, her skirts soaked from creek water, long frozen against her calves. Her boots, one split, one patched with cloth, were caked in dirt and torn at the sole, and still she moved forward. One child strapped to her back, one on each side clinging to her hands. The baby hadn't cried in hours. The oldest, Mary, had stopped speaking altogether. And Thomas, the middle one, swayed as he walked, his small hand limp in hers. Rachel muttered prayers she could barely remember. Every step was a plea, every breath a bargain. She didn't know if they'd made it 30 miles or 300, but she knew this was the end. She saw it just past the tree line, a cabin half buried in shadow. No smoke from the chimney, no horses tied outside. The front door leaned, not broken, but not welcoming either. It didn't matter. She stumbled forward. Her knees buckled once, but she held Thomas upright and yanked Mary closer. Then she reached the steps and collapsed against the wood, her hand knocking weakly once, then again, before her body gave out entirely. The baby on her back whimpered. That was all. Inside, a man heard the knock, and he didn't move. Colt Avery sat at his table, one hand still curled around a tin cup of coffee gone cold. His revolver lay beside it, always within reach. He hadn't, to then, heard a knock in over a year. He wasn't sure if he was imagining it, but then it came again, fainter now. Not frantic, not violent, just tired. He rose slowly, bones stiff from a night in the chair. The floor creaked beneath his boots as he stepped toward the door, then paused. Something in his gut twisted. He opened it anyway. She was on her side, face down in the mud, dress torn at the hem. A baby strapped to her back. 2 children hunched at her side, one slumped over, the other swaying where she knelt. Colt's heart kicked hard against his ribs. He hadn't seen a woman in over a year. Hadn't seen children since he cursed low under his breath and stepped forward, scooping Rachel into his arms without ceremony. Come on, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Hell's the next stop if you don't move fast. The baby let out a tiny gasp of air as Colt turned and carried them all inside. The door slammed shut behind them. Inside, it took minutes before anyone moved again. Colt lay Rachel down near the fire and stripped off her frozen shawl. Her skin was white as salt, her lips cracked deep enough to bleed. Mary curled into a corner near the hearth, eyes wide and unblinking. Thomas lay still, but breathing. The baby stirred faintly. Colt grabbed every quilt he owned, throwing them over the children first, then the mother. Then he lit the second fire one in the stove, shoving in wood until the flames roared. The room began to warm, but not enough. Not yet. He sat beside her and watched. Rachel didn't stir for an hour. When she did, it was with a sharp intake of breath, her hands flying to the air like she was reaching for something that wasn't there. Her eyes locked on Colt's face. She tried to scream. Only a dry rasp came out. You're all right, Colt said low. You're safe. Where? Her voice cracked. Where am I? My cabin, he said. About 12 miles west of Dust Ridge. You walked here. Rachel blinked slow. I didn't know where else. You passed 20 other cabins on the trail. You came here on purpose. She coughed, tried to sit up. Her whole body trembled. I was told to. By who? My husband's brother, she whispered. He said you'd help. Colt's eyes darkened. What was his name? Marshall Avery. The name hit like a pistol shot to the chest. Colt stood, breathing hard. Marshall's dead. Rachel closed her eyes. Then you're the last man we've got. Colt turned away, fists clenched. I ain't been that in a long time. The baby stirred behind her, letting out a soft cry, weak, hoarse, but alive. Rachel reached for the child and pulled her close. I didn't come here for favors, she said, strength slowly returning to her voice. I came because we didn't have a choice. If I'd stayed in Harper's Hollow, we'd be buried by now. Colt didn't respond. He just stared into the fire like it held answers he didn't want to hear. The next hour passed in fragments. Rachel regained enough strength to drink broth Colt heated over the stove. Mary finally spoke a whisper in her mother's ear. Thomas sat up, dazed, but breathing easier. Colt didn't ask questions. He didn't need answers to know they were running from something. Or someone. By nightfall, the snow had started again. Colt stepped outside briefly, just to check the traps. When he returned, Rachel was standing, swaying slightly but upright, staring at the revolver on the table. I don't trust people with no past, she said quietly. But I trust them less when they hide it. Colt set down the rabbit's he'd skinned. You shouldn't be up. I've been through worse. Not with kids you haven't, Rachel didn't answer. Just looked at him like she was seeing something old and worn. They said you were a killer. Colt looked her square in the eye. I was. What changed? He glanced toward the fire. One day, I stopped being angry. Then the next day, I started being tired. She didn't flinch. I need you, Mr. Avery. He blinked. What for? To help me disappear. The silence that followed was so thick it could have cracked glass. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, the sharp cry of a hawk echoed through the pines. Colt didn't answer right away. He just reached for the revolver, checked the barrel, and set it back down slow. Then you best get some sleep, he said, because come morning, disappearing ain't the hard part. Staying gone is. And with that, he turned and walked out. Onto the porch. Into the storm. Inside, Rachel lay back down beside her children. Her hand found Thomas's, then Mary's. The baby was already asleep, but Rachel's eyes stayed wide open, staring at the rafters, her mind turning over a truth. She hadn't dared say aloud. She hadn't told Colt the full reason she came. And when it finally came out, it would change everything. The fire burned low before Rachel closed her eyes. She didn't sleep, not fully. Her body drifted in and out of a half-conscious haze, jolting awake at every creak of wood or gust of wind against the walls. The last time she'd slept through. The night was weeks ago, back before the landlord had sent his men to collect what she didn't have. Back before the neighbors started turning their faces away. Back before she realized grief would not be the hardest part of widowhood survival. Would. Especially with 3 mouths behind her. She rose before dawn. The baby whimpered beside her. She pulled the child close, breathing in the scent of milk and old cotton, then carefully checked the others. Thomas had a flush on his cheeks that worried. Mary was curled up tight, fists balled in her shawl. Rachel brushed hair from her daughter's brow and tucked the blanket tighter. Then she stood. The cabin was quiet. Colt wasn't inside. She stepped cautiously onto the porch, pulling the patched shawl over her shoulders, boots crunching softly on a dusting of snow. The sky was still black-blue, the first sliver of morning only beginning to color the horizon. Frost clung to the rails. The forest around them was bone still. Then she saw him. Colt stood a few yards away, splitting logs in the dark. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows, despite the cold, breath coming in visible clouds. Every swing of the axe was sharp and deliberate, as if the motion itself kept something worse at bay. Rachel crossed her arms, watching. You don't sleep much. He didn't look up. Not for a while now. You do this every morning? Every day? I don't want to lose my mind. She hesitated. And the days you do? He paused mid-swing. Those are quieter. Rachel didn't press further. She stepped off the porch and walked to where a pile of firewood sat by the stump, kneeling beside it to stack what he'd already split. Her fingers stung from the cold. But she didn't stop. Not until he did. You don't have to do that, Colt muttered. I know, she said. But I want to. They worked in silence until the sun breached the trees, streaking the snow with gold. Only then did Colt lower the axe and nod toward the cabin. "Kids still sleeping?" "For now," Rachel replied. "But Thomas has a fever." Colt wiped sweat from his brow. "I've got willow bark in the shed. Won't cure much, but it'll help bring it down." She opened her mouth to thank him, but something shifted in the woods fast, subtle, not animal. Colt heard it too. His head snapped toward the sound. He dropped the axe and pulled the rifle that leaned against the nearby stump. Rachel froze. Inside. He said low. Now she ran. Just as she slammed the door behind her, Colt was already at the edge of the porch. Gun raised, eyes scanning the trees. Nothing moved. 5 minutes passed. 10. Rachel paced in front of the hearth, her heart galloping. Mary stirred awake beside the fire, then Thomas. Rachel crouched beside them, whispering reassurances she barely believed herself. Outside, the wind picked up again. Colt came in just as the clock struck 6. He locked the door behind him, placed the rifle gently on the table. "Could have been a deer," he muttered. "Could have been something else." Rachel stood, fists clenched. "Is someone after you?" He looked her in the eye. "Someone's always after me." Her mouth went dry. "You think they'd follow us here?" "Depends who they is." She didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she turned toward the fire, where Thomas now coughed weakly into his sleeve. She knelt beside him, placing a hand to his forehead. Hot. Too hot. Colt moved past her toward a wooden cabinet. He pulled out a satchel, rummaging through it until he found what he needed, a pouch of dried bark and a small tin kettle. He poured water from the pitcher, lit the stove again, and set the kettle on top. "Brew this for him," he said, passing her the bark. "Let it steep long. Make him drink all of it, even if he hates the taste." Rachel took it with shaking hands. "Thank you? I don't do this for thanks." She stared at him. "Then why?" He didn't answer. Just turned and walked out again, leaving the door ajar this time, as if whatever was out there might come calling again, and he meant to meet it first. *** Later that day, the sky clouded over. By noon, Rachel had fed the children what little Colt had jerky, hard biscuits softened in broth, dried apples. It was more than she'd seen in a week. Still, her mind raced ahead. How long could they stay? What would she do when Colt decided their time was up? Because he would. People like him didn't keep company for long. And yet, as the sun dipped lower, Rachel caught glimpses of something in him that didn't match the stories she'd been told. He moved quiet, careful. When Thomas cried, Colt didn't flinch. When Mary tripped over the firewood stack, he lifted her upright without a word. When the baby spit up, he handed Rachel a clean cloth from a drawer without even looking her way. Like he'd already thought of it. He didn't smile. Not once. But he wasn't cruel. And when night fell, he didn't kick them out. Instead, he pulled a second mattress from the loft and laid it out on the floor, just beside the stove. "You'll sleep warmer here," he said. Rachel stared at him. "You don't owe us this." He met her eyes. "I didn't do it for you." But Rachel saw something behind the words, a flicker of something old, buried beneath layers of ash and silence. She didn't ask. Not then, but she knew. Whatever had made him a wanted, man hadn't taken all the good from him, not yet. She lay down that night beside her children and told them a story. One about a river and a boat, and how brave people could sail even when the current tried to pull them under. She told it slow and soft. She watched their eyes close, one by one. When the fire was nearly out, Colt spoke from the shadows. "I killed a man once for laying hands on a child." Rachel didn't move. "I didn't plan to. Didn't think about it. Just saw it happen. And that was it. He died before he hit the ground." She turned her head. Was it the first? No. She waited. The last? His jaw clenched. It should have been. Silence settled between them again. Heavy. Sharp. Then Rachel spoke. "My husband was shot over a sack of flour." Colt blinked. You never said. We were saving it for winter. Man rode in from out east. Said everything in town was his now. My husband refused, so he pulled a gun. She exhaled. Just like that. I buried him with my hands. Colt's voice was rough. And the man? He's sheriff of Harper's Hollow now. Colt said nothing for a long time. Then, that's why you came here. Rachel nodded once. I need to vanish before he comes looking. He doesn't leave loose ends. Colt looked into the fire. His hand curled slowly into a fist. Then you came to the right place. Outside, the wind howled again. But this time, Rachel didn't shiver. And deep in the forest, past the edge of the trail, a shadow stepped through snow, boots silent gaze. Sharp, following tracks that had begun to melt but not disappear. It snowed again the next morning, but only lightly thin flurries, dusting the trees and soaking into the ruts of long-forgotten wagon trails. The frost came back thick, sealing the cabin's windows in a sheen of ice that blurred the world beyond them. Rachel didn't notice it at first. She was too busy trying to get Thomas to drink more of the bitter Willowbrew Colt and left steeping on the stove. He gagged on it. It tastes like dirt. The boy groaned, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Rachel gently set the tin, cup aside, and stroked his hair. It's not supposed to taste good. It's supposed to help. I feel cold. I know, baby. That means it's working. Just rest. Mary sat in the corner nearby, wrapping a piece of thread around a carved twig like it was a doll. The baby fussed in a nest of blankets Rachel had rigged in one of Colt's drawers. Rachel moved between them like a ghost, floating, tending, folding, boiling more water, stirring weak oatmeal, checking Colt's clock every 10 minutes, though she didn't know what she was waiting for. It was nearly an hour past dawn before Colt returned. He stepped through the door with his hat dusted in snow and the expression of a man who'd already been to hell and back before breakfast. Rachel looked up from the stove. You were gone. Had to check the west trail. Found boot prints headed too close. Her stomach dropped. You think it's? I don't know who it is yet, but someone's poking around. He moved toward the hearth and stripped off his coat, shaking it out by the door. Rachel noticed his knuckles were raw, pinked, with fresh scrapes, and there was a new rip in his sleeve. She didn't ask what happened. Colt nodded toward Thomas. How's he? Still warm. Not worse, but not better. I'll boil more bark. Maybe add honey this time. Won't help. The fever, but he might stop fighting you on it. Rachel smiled faintly. You have honey? Traded for it. 3 bullets and an old watch. The fire popped softly. Rachel stirred the pot on the stove, listening to the quiet groans of timber and wind. What if whoever's out there doesn't? Stop? She asked. Colt looked over slow. Then I don't stop either. She turned to face him. You can't protect us forever. I don't plan to. That stung, more than she wanted to admit. Rachel busied her hands with the spoon, but her voice came low, clipped. I see. So you'll throw us out soon. No, Colt said. I mean, I don't plan to need forever. Just long enough to make sure they don't find you. She didn't know what to say to that ... by midday. The baby was crying nonstop. Colt kept the other kids occupied dragging out old tins to make a game of stacking them, showing Mary how to carve a small toy animal from scrap pine, letting Thomas rest near the stove while he repaired a broken chair leg with wire and a nail. Rachel paced with the baby, whispering lullabies until her voice went raw. Nothing worked. He's hungry, she said finally. I haven't eaten enough. I can't feed him, right? Colt stood. There's a creek a mile east with fish under. The ice. He'll be slow, easy to pull. I'll bring back what I can. Rachel looked toward the forest. It's not safe. Nothing ever is, he said, pulling on his coat. Lock the door behind me. If I'm not back before sunset, take the trail north. She opened her mouth, but he was already gone. Asterisk, he didn't come back by sunset. Rachel waited at the window, heart beating hard. Thomas was asleep, but sweating. Mary looked pale. The baby was crying again. Rachel bundled them all in layers, packing what she could into Colt's old saddlebag. She checked the rifle. 2 bullets. She'd never shot one in her life. The forest darkened dot, then dash movement dot a shape. At the tree line, Rachel dropped to the floor, pulling the children with her. She held her breath, heart thundering. It wasn't Colt. She could tell by the gait, the shoulders, the strange stillness of the figure. And then it was gone. She didn't sleep that night. Just sat in front of the door with the rifle in her lap, the baby tucked against her chest, her eyes fixed on the trees. The next morning, Colt returned. His coat was torn and soaked, his lip was split, but he was alive. And in one hand he held a string of 3 fish. Rachel stared at him like he was a ghost. "You? Where were you?" "Caught a trail," he said, stepping inside. "One man, alone. Think he's scouting. Got close, too close. Had to make sure he wouldn't try again." Her voice cracked. "Did you kill him?" Colt didn't answer at first. He dropped the fish on the table and turned toward the stove. "I didn't have to." Rachel set the baby down and crossed the room. "You left us here all night. What? If he'd come to the cabin? What if?" "He didn't," Colt said, "because I made sure of it." His voice was rough, tired. There were dark smudges under his eyes, and the blood at his collar was crusted dry. Rachel swallowed hard. "Thank you." He didn't reply. Instead, he cleaned the fish, cooked them, fed them to the children in silence. Rachel, for the first time in weeks, ate until her belly hurt. ***. Days passed. The snow didn't stop. Thomas's fever broke. Mary started to smile again. The baby, still thin and fretful, at least slept more than he cried. Rachel started to trust her footing in the cabin, to know which floorboards creaked, which drawers held which tools, when the chimney clogged, and how to fix it. Colt didn't speak much, but he didn't keep his distance either. Sometimes Rachel found him staring at her, not like a man looking at a woman, but like a man remembering something he'd thought long lost. Sometimes he'd watch the children, a flicker of something behind his eyes. And one night, when Thomas asked if Colt had a family, the man stood so abruptly his chair scraped across the floor, and he walked outside without a word. Rachel didn't follow. But later that night, she found a small wooden horse on the table, hand carved smooth. Thomas clutched it in his sleep. The next morning, she found Colt sitting by the edge of the forest, hands resting on his knees, eyes far away. "Had a daughter," he said without looking at her. Rachel sat beside him, silent. She was 5. Her name was Annie. She liked yellow flowers. Laughed like she couldn't be stopped. She died when the cough came through the valley. And her mother, she followed not long after. "I'm sorry," Rachel whispered. "She was the last good thing I had. After that, I stopped being someone worth knowing." Rachel shook her head. "You kept my children warm. You pulled fish from frozen creeks. You stood between us and a man who wanted blood. That's not worthless." He turned toward her. "It's not enough either." "Maybe not, but it's something." They sat there a long time. ***. 3 days later, the storm hit. The sky turned, the color of steel. Winds howled like beasts in the trees. Snow came sideways, slashing across the windows, seeping into every crack of wood and stone. Colt stacked firewood inside, blocking the door. He reinforced the shutters, sealed the chimney, with a wet cloth to keep it from smoking back. Rachel boiled what food they had, cooked everything before the cold could claim the stove. Then the power of it all came howling, snapping trees, shaking the walls like fists pounding against heaven. The baby cried. Mary sobbed. Thomas clung to Rachel's skirt. Colt moved through it all like he'd done it before, calm, fast, deliberate. But by nightfall, something changed. There was a sound under the wind, a thud. Then another. Rachel went still. Colt raised a hand. Another thud closer this time. Then came a voice. "Colton Briggs." Rachel's blood froze. You in there, Briggs? I know you're hiding her. Colt didn't move. The voice laughed. You. Think I'd let a woman make a fool of me? Rachel's breath caught. She knew that voice. Sheriff Calvin Rourke, the man who killed her husband. The storm didn't drown it out. Nothing could. He was here. Somehow, some way he had found them. Colt stepped toward the window, rifle in hand, jaw clenched tight. Rachel gripped his arm. Don't go out there. I have to. No, Colt. Please, he'll kill you. Colt looked at her. Not if I kill him first. She shook her head. Don't become what he is. Colt's eyes flashed. That's the only language, men. Like him, understand? Outside, the sheriff laughed again. Come out, Colton. Bring me the girl, and I'll let you keep your head. Colt moved toward the door. Rachel blocked his path. Colt's next words weren't angry. They were quiet. I won't let him take her. Or you. Or the children. He doesn't get to decide how this ends. The door creaked as Colt gripped the handle. And Rachel, torn between the man who'd sheltered her and the monster who chased her, whispered, Then don't let it end. The wind raged so loud, Rachel could barely hear her own breath. But she heard Colt's boots on the floorboards, steady as judgment, and the sound of the latch lifting felt louder than a gunshot. Wait, she said, grabbing his coat sleeve. Please. Colt paused, eyes flickering back to the stove where the children huddled. Mary was crying silently now, head buried in Thomas's shoulder. The baby wailed in his basket. He'll kill you, Rachel whispered. And when you're gone, he'll come inside. I know. He looked down at her hand, pale and shaking against his sleeve. I know. He repeated more softly, and then he opened the door. Snow blasted in like smoke from a cannon. The fire leapt in protest, and Rachel pulled the baby to her chest. Cold. Bit her skin immediately, cruel and hard, but Colt didn't flinch. He stepped out into it like he belonged to it. Rachel shut the door behind him, heart galloping. Then she ran to the window. Through the frost-blurred pane, she could just make out two figures. Colt, a dark outline against the snow, rifle loose at his side, and Calvin Rourke, coat flapping like a vulture's wings, gun already drawn, boots planted in a way that told her he wasn't here to bargain. Colt raised one hand, slow. I ain't hiding her, he called out. She came to me. She's mine, Calvin spat. She's my debt to settle. You know what she did? Colt didn't blink. I know what you did. That stopped him. I know you murdered an unarmed man for standing in your way. I know you burned his crops and threatened his kin. I know you told folks she'd run off with another man, just so nobody'd look twice when her husband never came home. The wind howled through the trees like it wanted blood. Rachel watched Calvin's posture shift. His smirk faded. You're talking like a man who doesn't know who he's speaking to, he said. Colt took a step forward. You think being sheriff makes you a god? It makes me law. No, Colt growled. It makes you next. And then the gunshots started. Rachel screamed. She couldn't tell who fired first. It was too fast. 2 cracks, then 3. Snow exploded around Colt's feet. He dove left, rolled, came up firing. Calvin dropped to one knee, took cover behind. A tree, another shot. Colt staggered back, hit, maybe, or slipping on ice. Rachel couldn't see. She tore open the door. Get back inside. Colt roared. She froze. The baby wailed against her chest. Then she saw the blood on his arm, bright, running quick down his sleeve. He fired again, sharp, brutal. Then the gun clicked dry. And Calvin laughed. Colt reached for the knife on his belt, but Calvin was already advancing. Should have stayed dead in the mines like they said, Calvin hissed. Or was it the gallows you walked away from? Colt didn't answer. His breath fogged the air. Blood soaked into the snow. Rachel saw his stance falter his. Knees buckling, not from fear, but blood loss. And that's when she moved. She grabbed the fire poker from beside the hearth. slid the baby into Thomas's lap with shaking hands. "Don't open the door for anyone but me," she told him. "Do you hear me?" Thomas, pale and wide-eyed, nodded once, and Rachel ran into the storm. The wind knocked her sideways. Snow lashed her skin, but she saw them just ahead, shadows tangled in violence. Calvin had Colt against a tree, one hand on his throat, gun raised for the killing blow. Rachel didn't think. She just screamed and swung the iron poker. It hit Calvin square in the side of the head. He roared in pain, stumbling. His gun fell. Colt slumped forward, gasping. Rachel raised the poker again, but Calvin grabbed her wrist, twisted hard. "You little—" Colt surged up, blade flashing. He drove it into Calvin's leg. The sheriff howled and dropped Rachel. She staggered back. Colt kicked him, sending him sprawling. Then he turned, grabbed Rachel's arm, and hauled her away. They ran limping, dragging through snow, Colt's coat soaked, Rachel's teeth chattering uncontrollably. Behind them, Calvin didn't chase, but his voice carried on the wind like a curse. "This ain't over, Briggs. I'll find you both. I'll burn that cabin to the ground." ***. They slammed the door behind them and collapsed. Rachel was crying. Colt's face was gray. "You're bleeding," she whispered. "I've bled worse," he rasped. "We need to." "Move? Now?" He nodded. "He'll come back with men. We won't survive a siege. But the children—" "I know," he said. "That's why we leave now, while there's still time." Rachel wrapped his arm over her shoulders, helping him stand. Inside, the children were silent, watching. Mary's lip trembled. Thomas stood protectively in front of the baby. Rachel crouched. "We're going on a trip," she told them gently. "Right now. It's going to be cold, but we'll be together." Thomas nodded. "I'll help." They packed in minutes. Colt gave Rachel his knife. The gun was out of bullets. He wrapped a belt tight around his upper arm to slow the bleeding. Every movement cost him, but he didn't slow down. By the time they stepped out again, dawn was breaking and the storm had passed. But the cold was worse now, the kind that bit bone, the kind that reminded you were mortal. Colt led them northeast through the pines. There was a shack, he said, a place he'd once hid horses. Far enough to buy them time. Rachel carried the baby. Thomas helped. Mary. Colt walked with a limp, but they walked. For hours. ***. By midday, they reached the shack. It was half buried in snow, the roof sagging. But it held heat once they lit a fire. Colt collapsed by it, shaking, sweat shining on his brow. Rachel boiled snow to clean his wound. It was bad, deep. She wrapped it tight, changed the cloth twice when it soaked through. Colt never complained, but he didn't eat, didn't speak. The baby cried. Rachel held him close, and that night, when everyone slept, Rachel stayed awake, watching Colt breathe. His hand twitched once, then again. She reached over and took it in hers. "I won't let you die," she whispered. "Not after all this." He didn't answer, but he didn't let go. ***. The next morning, the world was quiet. Colt was alive. Weak, but alive. Rachel fed the children the last of the dried apples. The baby suckled again, just for a few moments, but enough. Enough to make her believe maybe they'd survive. But as she stepped outside to fetch more wood, she saw them. Tracks. Multiple horses, headed straight for the shack. She ran back inside. "Colt," she hissed. "They found us." He pushed himself upright, breath ragged. "There's a trapdoor," he muttered. "Under the hay, crawl space. Old smugglers used it. Take the kids." "No." "What about you?" "I'll buy time. I won't leave you." "Rachel," he said, voice suddenly sharp. "You've walked 30 miles for those children. You carried them through cold and hunger and death. You don't stop now." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Please." But he pushed the hay aside and shoved open the trapdoor. Rachel gathered the children, kissed them one by one, and climbed down with them into the dark. Colt closed it after them. The last thing she saw was his silhouette, against the firelight tall, bleeding but unbroken. Asterisk, asterisk above. They heard HOOTCATS boots voices. Then came Calvin's snarl. Where is she, Briggs? Colt's voice answered low and calm. Gone, you lying bastard. You've already lost, Colt said. You just don't know it yet. There was a scuffle, a crash. Something broke wood, maybe a chair. Then a gunshot. Another. Rachel clutched the baby tighter. And then silence. Long. Awful. Terrifying. Then dash footsteps above them. Slow. Measured. Coming closer to the trapdoor. Rachel didn't breathe. A hand slid across the boards. Then a knock. Twice. Soft. Rachel looked up. Colt? She whispered. No reply. Then the knock again. Same rhythm. And her heart shattered. Because she knew that. Knock. It wasn't Colt. It was Calvin. The knocks came again, slow, polite, like a man tapping the door of a church. But it was mockery. Rachel heard it in the rhythm. Calvin wasn't rushing. He had time. He had power. And now, he wanted her to know it. She pressed her hand over the baby's mouth, not to smother, just to quiet the sound of his breathing. His small chest rose and fell against her ribs. Mary whimpered into Thomas's shoulder, and Thomas squeezed his little sister's hand tighter. Above them, footsteps moved calm, deliberate. Floorboards creaked. A shadow passed over the cracks of the trapdoor. Don't think I don't know, Calvin called out, his voice echoing through the tiny shack. You think you're clever. Think you're survivors. I've seen rats do the same hide in a hole and wait for hunger to drive them out. Rachel didn't dare move. I was going to burn the place down, Calvin continued. But I want to. See you crawl. Want to hear the way you beg, Rachel. Same way your husband did before I put him in the ground. Thomas flinched. Rachel pulled him close. You lied to this man, Calvin sneered. Told him some sob story, I'm sure, about your poor, dead Daniel. But you didn't tell him the truth, that you ran, that you let your husband die, that the trapdoor, creaked. Rachel's heart slammed against her ribs. A pause, then a bang as something struck the floorboards hard, just inches above her. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. Calvin laughed. Too scared to talk now, huh? He said. That's all right. I'll talk. I'll talk till you're too afraid to breathe. And he did. He kept talking. For minutes that dragged like hours. He paced. He lied. He painted her past in filth and ash. Said things she wouldn't repeat, not even in the dark. Her hand never left the baby's mouth. Her other arm never left Thomas and Mary. But her mind burned. With rage, with memory. And then silence. Not sudden. Not sharp. Just a lack of sound. Rachel strained to hear. She caught her breath. No boots. No voice. No knock. Only the wind beyond the shack, hissing soft against the eaves. She waited. 1 minute. 2. 5. And then, carefully, Rachel nudged the trapdoor. Just enough to peer out through the smallest crack. The fire was still burning low. But Calvin Rourke was gone. Asterisk. Rachel waited another 10 minutes before daring to emerge. She helped the children up first. Thomas, pale but brave, holding Mary's hand. Then the baby, asleep now from fear or exhaustion. And finally, herself. The shack looked undisturbed. A few broken boards. A smear of blood. Colt's? Calvin's? She didn't know. The door was open to the snow, but Colt was gone. She searched. The trees first, then the slope behind the shack, then the old woodpile where he'd once hidden rifles. Nothing. No body. No trail. Not even a footprint in the freshly fallen snow. Her throat tightened. Colt, she whispered. Please. But he didn't answer. Asterisk. They buried the fire, took what little food remained, wrapped themselves in Colt's old coat and the blanket from the bed, and they walked. She didn't know where. Not exactly. Just away. Away from Calvin's voice. away from the place that had become both refuge and trap. Each step hurt. The children stumbled, but they didn't complain. Rachel carried the baby, then Mary when her legs gave out. She held Thomas's hand the whole way. Her body ached, her fingers cracked and bled, but her mind moved forward like a flame, refusing to die. She whispered to herself as she walked, "We'll find him, we'll find him. He's not gone." Somewhere past the ridge, they found a road half buried, but still visible. Wagon tracks, old but there. And something else, a glove. Torn, leather, familiar. Colt single quotes S. Rachel held it against her chest like a prayer. Asterisk, asterisk, by dusk, they reached a small frozen creek and followed it downstream. Just as the sky darkened to violet, Thomas pointed. There! Smoke. Not much. Just a wisp. But real. They hurried toward it. A cabin smaller than the last, slunked, leaning, but smoke meant people. And people meant food. Warmth. Shelter. Rachel knocked, too tired to be afraid. A face appeared behind the curtain. Then the door opened. An old woman stood there, rifle in one hand, spectacles on her nose. She looked them over once head to toe. "You're either stupid or desperate," she said flatly. Rachel nearly collapsed. "Both," she said. "Please." The woman stared a moment longer, then stepped aside. "Get in." Asterisk, asterisk. The cabin was warmer than it looked. A stew boiled in a kettle. Herbs hung drying above the fire. The woman didn't ask many questions, just handed Rachel a bowl, then fed the children. Only after they'd eaten and the baby was asleep did she speak again. "You from north of here?" Rachel nodded. "The shack near the pine ridge." "Briggs's place?" Rachel froze. "You knew him?" The woman snorted. "Everyone knew Colt Briggs, or thought they did. Killed a man with his bare hands once to save a child. Or maybe 2 men, or 20. Depends who's telling it." Rachel held her breath. "Have you seen him?" The woman stirred the stew. "Saw him 3 nights ago. Came limping through here, with a shoulder like raw meat and eyes full of ghosts. Wouldn't stay." Rachel's hands trembled. "Where'd he go?" "Didn't say. Just left a note." The woman walked to a shelf, pulled a folded piece of paper from a book, and handed it over. Rachel opened it. The handwriting was rough, but she recognized it instantly. "If she comes through here, tell her I went south, toward Canyon's End. Tell her not to follow me. Tell her I'm not worth saving." Rachel pressed the note to her lips, then looked up. "Do you have a map?" Asterisk, asterisk. They left the next morning. The woman Agnes tried to stop her. "You've got 3 children and half a stomach between you," she warned. "You go south and you won't find shelter till the canyon. If you're lucky." "I've done worse," Rachel said. Agnes shook her head. "You should rest." "I will, when I find him." Agnes studied her for a long, silent moment, then gave her the map. Asterisk, asterisk. The journey south was worse than anything Rachel had faced before. The cold deepened. The wind turned savage. They lost the trail more than once, nearly slipped into a frozen ravine, ran out of food for a full day before stumbling into an abandoned trapper's hut with just enough dried meat to keep the children alive. Rachel never cried, not even when her feet bled, not even when her fingers turned purple with cold. She only cried once, when Thomas, too tired to walk, asked if they were going to die. "No," she said, holding his face in both hands. "Because I didn't walk 30 miles to give up now." He didn't ask again. Asterisk, asterisk. They reached Canyon's End 5 days later. It wasn't a town, just a cut in the land, red rock and shadow. A narrow path winding into nowhere. Locals said outlaws hid there sometimes. Said ghosts did too. Rachel didn't care. She walked the path at dawn, holding the baby close, Mary and Thomas clinging to her skirt. Then a fire, a small one, just up the ridge. And beside it him. Colt Briggs. Pale, gaunt, but alive. He looked up. Saw her. His expression didn't change. Not at first. Then something cracked in his eyes. Rachel? She didn't stop walking. Just dropped to her knees in front of him. You left, she said. I thought I had to. You're a fool. No. And then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. You're my fool, she whispered. His hands rose slowly, touched her shoulders. I dreamed you came. I did. I dreamed you brought the sun. She laughed through tears. You're delirious, he smiled. A little. The baby stirred in her arms. Colt looked down at him. You named him? She shook her head. I was waiting. He nodded, then looked out over the canyon. I thought I'd die here. Rachel leaned against him. You didn't. And somewhere behind them, Mary began to hum. Just softly. Just enough. The sun rose, and for the first time in weeks, Rachel let herself believe maybe they'd made it. Maybe the worst was over. But then, gunfire. One shot, then another. Colt shoved Rachel down, covered the children. A voice echoed off the cliffs. You really thought you'd outrun me, Briggs? Calvin, again, and this time he'd brought men. Colt didn't lift his head, didn't flinch, just curled tighter around Rachel and the children, shielding them with his body as dust rained from the ledge above. One shot, and another closer now, echoing off the stone like a war drum in. A canyon made for graves. Rachel could hear the hoofbeats before she saw them. 4 horses. Maybe 5. She grabbed Mary, pulled her close. Thomas crouched behind a boulder, eyes wide, the baby pressed to his chest like a prayer. Colt moved faster than a man with half a shoulder left should have. He pushed himself up, dragging Rachel by the arm behind a jutting ridge of stone, just as another shot struck where her head had been a second earlier. You shouldn't have come, he hissed. You left me with no choice. He gave her a look that was part fury, part awe. But he didn't argue. Instead, he scanned the rock face. The ridge behind them dropped into a narrow funnel-less chute of stone and sand, flanked by jagged brush. Take the kids, he said already, unlatching the rifle from where he'd stashed it beneath a flat stone days ago. Run through that chute. Hug the wall. Move low. Don't look back. Rachel stared at him. And you? He chambered around. I'll buy you 2 minutes. No, Rachel, we're not doing this. You're not dying for us. Then you better run faster than you ever have. A bullet sparked near. His boot. Colt didn't wait. He ran out the opposite way, rifle up, firing once, then again, drawing the rider's attention up and over the ridge, away from the children. Rachel didn't want to move, but she had no choice. She grabbed Thomas's hand, slung Mary onto her hip, held the baby in the crook of her arm, and ran. The sand slipped under her feet. Thorns clawed her dress. Wind sliced at her cheeks. But she didn't stop. Above them, gunfire cracked like thunder. Mary sobbed. Thomas grunted each time they slipped, but didn't let go of her hand. The baby cried once, just once, then went. Quiet, eyes wide. Rachel didn't look back, didn't breathe, just ran. Colt's aim was off. He knew it. His shoulder screamed with every recoil. Blood soaked through the binding Rachel had wrapped days ago. But he kept firing. One rider fell. Another swerved. They didn't expect him to fight. Not like this. Not still standing. Calvin didn't fire. He watched. He wanted it slow. Colt saw it in his eyes when their gazes locked across smoke and dust. And all the years between them. You always were a stubborn bastard, Calvin called out. Colt spat blood. Takes one to know one. Another shot closer. A rock chipped near his face. He ducked, rolled, cursed the pain that lit his bones. Like fire, he could feel himself fading, not from fear, from blood loss, from weeks of hiding, fighting, hoping against logic. But when he thought of Rachel's face, the way she'd looked at him this morning, the way her voice trembled when she said, "My fool," he found one more breath, one more shot. He rose and fired, Rachel. Hit the canyon floor hard. The chute ended in a flat stretch of gravel and wind-scoured stone. A dry riverbed. The baby cried again, louder this time. Thomas fell, scraped his elbow, got up. Rachel spun. Colt wasn't behind them, but someone else was. A rider bigger than the others, rounding the bend above. Coming fast, eyes locked on. Her. She froze. He lifted his gun, and then crack. He tumbled sideways off his horse. Colt. Standing atop the ridge, pale as death, rifle still smoking. Rachel wanted to cry, or scream, or run to him, but more riders followed. She could hear them now. Too close. No more time. She turned and ran again. Asterisk Canyon's end wasn't a town, but it had a name for a reason. At its far edge, the ground dropped off into a maze of rocks and twisted brush, a dead end, unless you knew where to step. Colt had come here for a reason. He knew the way. So did Rachel barely. She remembered a path he mentioned once. A smuggler's trail that wound down the canyon wall, so narrow it wasn't even visible unless you were standing on it. She found it by accident. Her foot slid on a rock, and there it was. A notch, barely wide enough for a child. Thomas pointed. There? Go. But you go, Thomas. He went. Mary followed. Rachel slid down after them, bracing the baby against her body with both arms. The path curved, dropped, curved again. Behind them, hooves rang out on stone. Voices shouted. Then a scream. Colt's name, her name. She didn't stop, didn't dare. Not until they reached the canyon floor, where brush grew thick and the world narrowed to thorns, dry creek beds, and shadows. Only then did she look up. Only then did she see the smoke. Not fire. Gunpowder. And silence again. Asterisk hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Rachel didn't know. She crouched beneath a low overhang. The children huddled around her. The baby slept somehow. Mary dozed. Thomas stayed alert. Rachel's body shook with cold, with fear, with the ache of too many days, and not enough hope. She kept looking up. Kept listening. Then boots. Slow, staggering. She rose too fast, hit her head on the stone, cursed, blinked through blood and sunlight, and saw him. Colt. Walking. Barely. One side of his shirt torn, blood down his arm, but breathing, alive. She ran to him, nearly dropping the baby. He caught her just barely. Are they gone? He rasped. She pulled him to the ground. He didn't protest. They lay there in the dirt like old stones. Finally worn smooth. Rachel sobbed into his chest. He winced, but didn't let go. Why'd you follow me? He whispered. Because you don't get to decide you're not worth saving. He chuckled, but it broke into a cough. I still think I'm not. Tough. You're stuck with us. He kissed her hair. And then slowly, painfully, his eyes drifted closed. She shook him. Colt. Nothing. Colt, no. Don't you dare. His chest rose, fell, but he didn't speak. She pressed her hand to his heart, still beating. Faint. But there, Rachel looked around. The canyon stretched ahead, vast, cruel, empty, but they had survived worse, and she would not stop now. She tore, stripped from her dress, bound his wound tighter, then stood. We go south, she told Thomas, voice steady. To what? He asked. To whatever's next. And they walked. Into the sun, into the unknown, toward the final chapter still waiting to be written. 3 weeks passed. Rachel had learned not to count them by sunrise or sunset, but by how many times Colt stirred in his sleep, how many times he muttered her name in fevered dreams, or blinked up at her as if unsure whether she was real or just. Another cruel memory. They'd found shelter in a narrow ravine south of Dry River Bend, a place so unmarked, so tucked into the folds of the earth, it didn't appear on any map. A shallow cave, enough to keep the wind from the children's faces and the heat off Colt's wound. Rachel had hauled water in shifts, taken to hunting squirrels with sharpened sticks and flat stones when the jerky ran out. Every day she did what needed doing with blistered hands and cracked lips, because the children were watching. Because Colt was still breathing. And still, there were nights she feared it wouldn't be enough. His wound festered on the second week. She boiled cloth, scraped bark from a willow tree, chewed it to pulp, and pressed it to the infection like her mother once did. It made Colt scream through clenched teeth, but he didn't pull away. He trusted her. He shouldn't have. She barely trusted herself. On the 17th day, he opened his eyes just long enough to whisper, "Tell the boy I was never brave." And when she said, "You were," he shook his head before sleep claimed him again. By the 21st day, he sat. Up. Took nearly an hour. He didn't speak at first, just stared at the cave's opening, where sunlight laced the dust. Then, with a voice hoarse and hollow, he said, "Still here?" Rachel didn't answer. She just pushed a cup of water into his hands. He drank like it was the first time water ever touched his lips. Then he looked at her, really looked at her. "What did I miss?" Rachel swallowed the lump in her throat. The baby started crawling. Colt blinked. "You serious?" She nodded. "She's fast." I turn my head, and she's in the brush eating dirt. He smiled, but the weight in his face didn't lift. "And the others?" "Thomas makes traps. Mary sings lullabies to birds." He chuckled, then winced. "You? I've aged a decade. You look better than me. You look like someone set fire to a scarecrow." "I'll take it." They sat in silence. Rachel knew it wouldn't last. It didn't, because Colt finally sighed, "We can't stay here." And she knew he was right. Asterisk. By the time they moved again, spring had begun its slow, stubborn crawl across the land. The desert breathed easier. The riverbed swelled with meltwater. And yet the world still felt cracked open and dangerous, like one wrong step would tip them back into the hell they'd barely survived. They traveled at night, resting during the day under rocks or in shallow groves. Colt walked with a limp and a bandaged arm that no longer moved right. But he walked. That was enough. He carried the baby now. Though Rachel still flinched every time he staggered, they passed through an abandoned mining camp where a rusted stove still held the outline of someone's last fire. Rachel took it as a sign. Life had been here. Life could be again. Then, on the third night out, they saw smoke. A small town no name posted, no sign welcoming travelers. Just one main road, a church steeple, a saloon, and a schoolhouse no bigger than a barn. Colt stopped at the ridge, eyes narrowed. "Don't like it? Don't trust it. Do you ever?" "No." Rachel looked at the children, thin and dust-covered, their eyes tired beyond their years. "We need food, milk, a place to sleep that isn't the ground. I know. I'll go." He grabbed her wrist. "No, they're not after me, Colt. That doesn't mean they won't use you to get to me. They don't know who I am. That won't matter." Rachel studied his face. "You don't think we deserve to be safe, do you?" He didn't answer. She walked down the hill. He didn't stop her. Asterisk. The townsfolk were quiet. Wary. But not unkind. A woman named Hedda ran the general store, gave Rachel half a loaf of bread, a pitcher of goat's milk, and a look that hovered somewhere between suspicion and pity. "You look like you've been running," she said. "Walking. With children?" "I've done worse." Hedda nodded. "You got a man?" Rachel hesitated. "He's near." "You in trouble?" Rachel paused again. "Not the kind that follows you, just the kind you carry." That seemed to satisfy her, or at least confuse her enough to let her leave. She returned up the hill. The children cheered. Colt just looked at her like he hadn't realized she could still surprise him. They ate, drank, rested. Then Colt said, "We move again at first light." Rachel didn't argue. Not then. She waited until the children were asleep and the wind was still, and then she turned to him. "You know they're gone, Colt. Calvin's dead. The others too. You saw it. I saw them fall. And you still think it's not enough? They have brothers, sons. Someone always does. So what's the plan? We run forever?" He didn't answer. So she said, you're not the only one with ghosts. He looked at her then, and for once he didn't look away. A week later, they found the ranch, It was half rotted, fenced in, but broken in parts. The barn had collapsed on one side. The well still worked. Whose was it? Rachel asked. Colt ran his hand over a post. Mine, she blinked. You built this? He didn't answer. Just walked inside, where the wind stirred dust in patterns no one had touched in years. Rachel followed. That night, they slept in the house. It smelled of mold and silence, but it held. In the morning, Colt fixed the door. Thomas fetched wood. Mary cleaned the floor with her shawl. Rachel boiled water and washed each child until their skin showed again. Colt didn't say they were staying, but he started building a fence the next day. By the third week, the children called it home. Colt built a chicken coop from salvaged planks. Rachel found hens at a neighbor's ranch, bartered for with stitches and stories. She never said how she convinced the neighbor to trust her. She just came back with a sack full of feathers and a quiet smile. One night, Mary asked if she could call Colt Pa. Rachel froze. Colt dropped his fork. And said, if your ma's all right with it. Mary looked at Rachel. Rachel nodded, trying not to cry. Thomas didn't say anything, but the next day he helped Colt with the roof. Seasons turned. Slowly, stubbornly. Colt stopped checking the road every morning. Rachel planted beans. The baby took her first steps between them, stumbling from Colt's arms to Rachel's skirts, falling, giggling, then standing again. They named her Hope. Colt said it was too on the nose. Rachel told him to shut up and kiss her. He did. Then, one morning, a rider came, dusty, tall, rifle across his back. Colt saw him first, from the fields. He told Rachel to get the children inside. He didn't reach for a weapon, just stood, straight and ready, as the man rode up. The rider tipped his hat. You Colt? I am. Heard you were dead. Not yet. The rider nodded. Good, you owe me $30. Colt blinked. What? The man grinned. From the poker game in Carson City. 15 years ago. You said you'd pay if I ever found you. Colt stared, then laughed. Deep and loud. Rachel came to the door. Man waved. Colt waved back. Life didn't get easier, but it stopped running. Rachel taught the children letters. Colt taught them how to mend fences, shoot straight, stand taller than fear. At night, they sat by the fire, and sometimes he told stories. Never the whole truth, but enough. Rachel watched him. He never said, I love you, but he never had to. She'd walked 30 miles in broken boots and bloody feet, through dust storms and doubt, to find him, and he'd kept her safe, not because she needed saving, but because he did. They didn't talk about what might come next. They didn't need to. They were already there. Together. Finally.